Hey, Peachtree family, it's Richard Kannwischer. I am so excited to invite you into the journey of this year with our podcast. This year, we're talking about Cultivate and what it means for God to grow the fruit of the Spirit within you and me. And so things like love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and so forth, that our lives are like a garden and that God is growing something beautiful and magnificent within you and me together in community. And so join us for this podcast, and I'm so excited to be with my friend, Justin Whitmel Earley. Justin, it's really good to be with you. Welcome to our Cultivate podcast, and thanks for being with me.
You're welcome. I'm honored that you would have me back after we talked about, what was it, year and a half, 2 years ago?
I don't often get invited back, so I get that's a unique privilege. Why don't you, in case people don't know you, why don't you introduce yourself? Give us the Wikipedia entry of Justin Earley.
Yeah, my quick version. I am married to Lauren. I have 4 boys. I am a business lawyer by day and also a writer and speaker by day. Somehow those 2 vocations get mashed together. I began my life as a missionary in China before I became a lawyer, and about a couple years into my lawyering career started writing, and now I get to do both. So I run a law firm here in Richmond, Virginia, and I also write a lot of books on habits. I write about habits. I love habits, and I'm sure we'll get into that, but that's kind of my lane.
Give us you have enough book, I was going to say discography because I was thinking in terms of albums, but they're actually books. And give us kind of a thumbnail sketch of where you started and the different ones that you've written thus far.
Yeah, there's a logic to me. I started, and there's a story behind it, but I'll give the quick overview of the logic. I started writing about spiritual disciplines in my mid-30s with a book called The Common Rule. It was about 4 daily and 4 weekly habits for spiritual formation. So it's really a book on how to practice a modern version of the classic spiritual disciplines in a regular vocation like lawyering. Mm-hmm. And then after that, I was writing about that while having kids, and I was realizing, all this habit forms the heart stuff kind of matters to how you parent. So I wrote a book called Habits of the Household, which is about habits and parenting and in the formation of spiritual life in the home, why the ordinary moments are actually the most extraordinary spiritual things that you teach. And then I started to realize I was sort of doing concentric circles. So I kept it going and wrote a book called Made for People that is about the habits of spiritual formation in friendship and community. That book is really an ode to the gift of friendship, and it's a look at the art of friendship. As friendship can't quite be made a habit. There's a lot more to it. So that book is about the arts and habits of friendship. And then my most recent book is, in one way, it's another expansion of the circle into looking at the physicality of spiritual disciplines. But in another way, it's kind of coming back to the center and re-looking at, for me, a very personal look at why are all these spiritual disciplines that are so important to my life and have been so important to the history of the church so incredibly physical? And why are all these physical habits that we think of all the time, exercising, eating, sleeping, the things that we usually feel like we're not doing well, but we always want to be doing better? I'm sort of asking, why do we feel that way? And I suspect it's because all these physical disciplines are actually more spiritual than we think. So this most recent book is called The Body Teaches the Soul, and it's about the ways that our spiritual disciplines are more physical than we think, and our physical disciplines are more spiritual than we think. But all of these to me are connected by the idea that habits form our heart a lot more than we think. And if we're going to follow Jesus with our heart and our heads, then we need to be following him and our habits, because that's where these 2 things get united.
So one of the things that you talk about in that latest book is you talk about how you probably didn't think your way into this problem, and that means you probably can't think your way out of the problem.
That's right.
So what do you mean by that when you say that?
Well, I should tell the story behind my books to answer that. And some people who have either read or maybe heard podcasts we did together 2 years ago will find some of this familiar, but my background is important here. So I mentioned I was a missionary in China before I became a lawyer, and that before I became a writer. The reason that happened was I started my life after college as a missionary in China, and I just had an incredible time sharing the gospel, teaching Chinese students the Bible. It was an amazing time of life. And then I felt called to go to law school, which is a kind of a wild transition. And not something that a lot of people say, like, I feel called to be a business lawyer.
Doesn't the pivot usually go in the other direction?
Exactly. Yeah. People were very surprised. I was very surprised. And it's really a whole different conversation on work and vocation and calling of why exactly I felt led by the Lord to go be a business lawyer. But let's just say that you grant me that point. Believe me, I ran my business law career with all the fervor of a missionary on a call. So I really believed in a purpose. As it turned out, I met a ton of people in law school who were like this. Law school draws people who feel called, whether by God or whether by what they think they should do in the world. A law school is full of people trying to change the world. And I realized that these people are like me, and we're all really driven and we all feel called. And something happened in that period where we all adopted the habits and practices of typical law school and lawyering, which are kind of what you expect of modern America, but just like amped up. I often say it's like, a regular person, but on crack.
Mm-hmm.
It's a regular person's busy life, but like we just take it, turn up the amp to 11, which practically, Rich, meant.
Was that a Spinal Tap reference that you just
you heard it? Okay, you heard it. The amp goes up to 11. Yeah, I'm glad you got that. Yeah. Some people will, some people won't. Some people are still like, what are they talking about?
Yeah, of course.
So, what did that look like? That meant I was constantly tethered to my phone and technology. I was constantly saying yes to every request to do something more because, we're constantly adding to our resume or our client base. We're always staying up later and always waking up earlier to pack one more thing in. I'm not eating meals on a normal schedule of a human being. I'm working all the time, and meals will fit into work. Likewise, rest may or may not fit into work. Likewise, I'm becoming a young father during this time. My wife and I started to have our boys in law school. So I come out of law school at the age of 29 and start at my dream job in mergers and acquisitions, which I still do. I run a business law firm now doing M&A work. But I started in a big law firm, like big, shiny international law firm, doing M&A work right around the age of 30. And months into my new job, have a total mental health breakdown, which, as I know now, is not unusual for lawyers at all. It's not unusual for modern Americans at all. Right. But we're like 3 to 4 times the average. And what that looked like was that I started experiencing insomnia, panic attacks, pretty severe like mental health swings to the point where I was actually struggling at one point with suicidal thoughts. A lot of that was unhealthy sleep meds that I was taking. But a couple months in, I'm either having to take sleeping pills or having a drink or two to fall asleep. And here's where the real realization came. I basically looked up one day and I was like, the missionary got converted to the nervous medicating lawyer. How did that happen? I still believe all the things that I believed as a missionary. And I had half a seminary, half of a Master of Arts in Religion, that I built up during this time. I'm overeducated. I know a lot. I'm thinking really well. And yet I'm looking up and realizing I'm living in a body that's racked by anxiety. It's seeping its way into my mind such that insomnia and panic are becoming normal things in my brain. And I didn't have a category for this. I didn't have a category for being a person who preached the gospel of peace and yet was living in a body of anxiety. And because I always thought, Rich, my worldview at the time was that worldview is dominant. So if you believe A, then that sinks down into your body. And so I was just really confused. But the Lord is so good. What I thought was the worst, scariest time in my life that could not be redeemed was the worst, darkest, scariest time in my life where the Lord was using it to teach me probably the most important lesson he's taught me in my life. And that was that my habits were forming my heart way more than I thought. And this was a slow process, but I started to realize basically through accidentally beginning to practice the spiritual disciplines. I one day, about a year into this struggle, got with 2 of my best friends and asked them to keep me accountable to a new program of daily and weekly habits that it was a total, almost random, I'll try anything. I was trying medication, I was trying counseling, I was trying new rhythms. When I started practicing what I now know are classic spiritual disciplines, I didn't really know it at the time, my life started drastically changing. And being a heady thinking lawyer who was in crisis suddenly having his life changed, I started reading. I was like, wait, what are these things? What are spiritual disciplines? Why is this helping me? Why is this rapidly changing my mental health? Why is this also like putting my intimacy with Jesus actually on a new level that even I hadn't experienced as a missionary in China? It was like all these things started to change, but I did not know why. And I could tell you lots more about what I learned, but the summary of that, I came out in my mid-30s saying, oh my gosh, your head can go one way and your habits can go the other. And your heart is most likely going to follow the habit. Like we fall in love with what we practice most often, not necessarily with what we think. And then our habits tend to lead the heart. And when we unite our head and habit, that's where we really start to experience what I think the Bible talks about when it talks about faith, like a faith that believes, but also follows Jesus, like where you're not separate between what you talk about and what you do. And that's where I started to realize, oh, I thought I could think my way out of any problem. That long story is coming back to your initial question. I thought that I could think my way out of a problem every day of the week. And what I realized is that there's a whole set of life. I mean, you could get me on the podium and I'd wax about worldview and the importance of education and correct theology. I'm still there. But what I realized is there's a set of problems that you practice your way into. There's a way of life that you practice your way into. And you can't just think your way out of that. You need to practice your way out of it. And that is basically what all my books are about. This Body Teaches the Soul is very specifically on the mental, physical, emotional health side of how to, of all our physical rhythms, practice our way into these problems, and how can we practice our way out. But that theory is what I believe is dominant, that we need to live a life where we're thinking and practicing.
Well, even the Bible uses the concreteness of what you're talking about when it says that we walk by faith. So it doesn't say that you just have faith. It's that it's an embodied, active, oriented kind of thing. And I think we'll have a chance to dive into that. One of the great surprises for me when I was reading your last book and having completed and launched Cultivate now is that you too talk about being able to tend to your life, your body, your mind, like a garden. So why do you think that image is helpful, biblical? Why did you go to that when you were trying to think about it?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that. And it was also the first thing that struck me about reading your book. I was like, oh, we're talking about the same thing. And why are we? Because the Bible talks like this, right? This is how the Bible talks. This is going to be hard to give a brief answer. I'm going to do my best. Okay. So
pretend like I'm an 8th grader.
Yeah. Here we go. I was trying to figure out in the past 5 years why physical disciplines like fasting, exercise, eating better, sleeping in healthy rhythms, why those were some of the most important levers in my mental health. It seemed like I was pulling physical levers and getting spiritual fruit. And I honestly felt uncomfortable about that because I was like, I think I'm just following all the life hacks and I'm calling it like spiritual fruit. And it felt to me like I was going outside of Christianity to get what I felt I needed. And so I was like, what does the Bible say about the body? Like maybe I have an underdeveloped theology of embodiment. And oh boy, did I. Yes. Oh my, did I. So as I started to read, and this is a common theme, like I'm a lawyer and I dive into reading. As I started to dive into like, why do I think about the body and the spirit and soul separately? What's going on here? I would say generally I found two things, and they're both from Genesis. One, I found Genesis 2:7, where God says he made Adam out of dust. That's organic material. That's matter. That's physical stuff. Breathe the spirit of life into him. That's like this is the whole biblical theme of where God breathes, where God speaks, reality is created, life happens. And where you have the spiritual married to the physical, we get this miracle of a human being. And that's the first use of this word soul in Genesis. So Genesis 2:7 is dust plus spirit equals soul. That math equation is a little bit oversimplifying it. This is a bit of a mystery. It's not as simple as a math equation, but that will give you the key ingredients right there to say, oh my gosh, you better not idolize the body because we are more than matter. And this is the great contribution of Christianity, to say there is more to life than what you see. But nor should you ignore the body, because apparently God made them on purpose. This was his plan. He called them good, indeed very good. He made them image bearers of God. And if you look at the trajectory of Scripture, we're made in bodies. We're saved by the body of his son, Jesus. We're going to be resurrected to bodies. This is not an accident. This is not a plan B. God loves bodies. And so did I have an underdeveloped theology of the body? Absolutely. I realized God loves them. And C.S. Lewis, who will always win putting it best, does put it best. He says, don't try to be more spiritual than God.
That's great.
He made matter. He loves it. So that was the first thing I saw, that this is the plan. And then very shortly after, I realized the best way to understand what to do with that body is to cultivate it like a garden towards love. Change happens at the pace of a garden. It is slow. Your body as a garden is also the best metaphor for how to think about it, because gardeners know you have a combination of agency and dependence. That agency is, if you don't do anything in a garden, you will either get a desert or a jungle. I mean, it will either die or it will kill itself. You need to act in a garden. This is the original vocation of Adam and Eve. Put them in a garden, call them to work. But if you idolize your work in a garden, you're in a realm of hurt, because it's not just you. Like, what's the soil that you have? It matters, and not everybody's soil is the same.
Yeah.
What's the weather that you have? What are the blights that come? Every farmer who's worth his salt knows he's working in conjunction with the land and God. And so that gardening image, I think, gives us not only a key idea of how we work towards change, but an idea that we actually have agency. We can. And that suddenly made sense to me, Rich, of why the Bible constantly talks in terms of agricultural metaphors for human beings.
Yeah.
Because we are the highest development of creation, but we are also like creation. This is why Jesus spoke so often farming parables. This is why Paul's like the fruit of the Spirit. This is, it makes sense of your life, and it also makes sense of your body. And so my big call for people to think about their bodies is garden it towards love.
I love that phrase. And we live in an information age, an industrial age, like all these other, like, you cannot manufacture the fruit of the Spirit.
That's right.
That's why the image, I think, is super helpful for us in the sense of Cultivate, or in the sense of the agricultural side of it. I loved your kind of dichotomy, or the both and of both agency and dependency, which we kind of forget about when you're thinking about making widgets, or when you're, trying to program something, if then this. Right. Like, it's not mathematical, it's not engineered. It is the kind of thing where you set the conditions by which this might happen, and it's a miracle every time it does.
That, I think, is what is the most exciting facet of accepting the Bible's metaphor for your body as a garden, is that it answers for you the apparent paradox of grace and effort. We both like to quote Dallas Willard as much as possible. The gospel is not opposed to effort, it's opposed to earning. The idea that, like, you are solely responsible for the result. And gardens are a wonderful paradigm for that, because of the aforementioned. You know that you have to do something, but like, no human being ever has actually caused a cell to reproduce. No human being ever has actually caused a sprout to come up. We create conditions for growth, but every single time, if you think about it enough, if you're really aware of what's happening, you have to be awestruck at the miracle of life, that physics continues to work on consistent properties, that cells grow. You can break your body down and exercise, and then feed it the right nutrition, and then go to bed on time. But the idea that your body rests and turn those nutrients into cellular reproduction that makes you stronger is grace. That's a miracle. And understanding your body as a garden is actually the best way towards health, because you're like, oh, I'm actually not in charge. Cancer might come for me at any time.
Right.
A bus might strike me. Autoimmune disease happen everywhere, but I can cultivate the conditions to steward my health in the best way possible. People get that about the body. People get that about farming. And the Bible wants you to get that about the fruit of the Spirit. Like, you can cultivate the spiritual disciplines that the Lord works the miracle of fruit in. And then you're out of the realm of legalism, but you're also out of the realm of surrendering, like, I'm not going to do anything,
Yeah.
and,
Like apathy.
you're into the realm of Christianity. And the garden metaphor has helped me so much with getting out of those two extremes that I constantly bounced back and forth between, and just into the realm of fruit of the Spirit, where you're gardening with dependence on the Creator and appreciating the miracle of fruit every time.
Yeah. I loved what you said earlier and what you write about in terms of we have a tendency to ignore or idolize. Can you give us an example of how we have a tendency to do that with one dimension of our lives, which
which is my favorite to pick? We can break it down later. I'll give mental health as the first example, because this was very personal to my initial struggle. I spent most of my early Christian life ignoring brain health or mental health, because I figured I'm a vending machine. Put the coin of truth in my ear and it's going to output peace in the body. So when I heard of somebody struggling with anxiety or depression, I would tacitly probably assume they had some mistaken assumptions about life. And if they learned the right things and were told the right things, they would get out of this, until it happened to me. And then
it's amazing how that's a change of perspective.
Boy, was I humbled. I was shocked to find that I could have a head full of truth and a body full of anxiety. And so I truly was ignoring a part of my body, which is called emotion. And there's just a wonderful realm of neurology that you can dive into here. And I think it always bears worth saying, the wonderful thing about God being actually real is that it means your body and all science and all creation is an apologetic for the God who made it. You will learn so much about who he is and who you are as you dive into what has he made. It's beautiful. And so as I started to dive into that, I quickly fell off the other end of it, because I realized, oh my gosh, there's so many people who struggle with this, and I did too, who started to realize, there are things going on in my brain that actually affect the way I feel. There's dopamine and there's brain chemicals, and there's trauma and lower brain patterns and all this stuff. And if you think about that inappropriately or too much, you will quickly go into idolizing your body, idolizing the brain. And I see a lot of people stuck here. And I actually got stuck here in some of my mental health journey, where I was like, well, what if it's all there is? Like, actually, what if I really am, like, everything I see and everything I feel and everything I touch is really just my brain's interpretation of sensory input? I'm locked inside this cranial vault of the dopamine lottery, and I lost it. My brain's not working right. This is a one-way street towards, I don't know, the insane asylum. This is a scary place to be. This is where a lot of people actually in our cultural moment exist, where they reduce all of life to matter. They reduce all of mental health to brain chemicals. And when you idolize that, it is terrifying, because there's no way out. And that's what I would say. So you don't want to ignore your brain. You do not want to idolize it. You want to image God in mental health, which is what we just talked about. It's the idea of your brain does matter. You better pay attention to that soil, because if you don't tend it, if you don't tend shalom in the mind, if you don't tend to healthy physical and spiritual rhythms, then you will get some jungle or desert up there. But if you think all you are is brain chemicals, you're either going to be very proud and vain about the dopamine lottery that you won, or you're going to be in abject despair about the mental health lottery that you lost. And you shouldn't be in either of those places. You should be in the beautiful realm of grace, which says to you, neuroplasticity exists and it's grace built into the brain. You can change.
Double click on that in case someone is unfamiliar on neuroplasticity. What do you mean by grace exists in the form of neuroplasticity?
Okay, again, the wonderful thing about science is that the more you dive into it, the more you're going to see who God is and why the Bible explains everything we know about human life. Any psychiatrist worth their salt is going to tell you You need to work top down and you need to work bottom up. So we need to have some truth telling in your life. You're not worthless. You're not just your past mistakes. You need to be like meditating and thinking about what reality actually is. That's top down work.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You also need to be dealing with what we call bottom up work, like lower brain patterns, where, before you give a speech, you feel anxious, not because you intellectually know you're going to mess up. You feel anxious because there's all parts of your body telling you there's a ton of people here. A lot of things could happen. You feel a certain way. And anybody who trains in athletics or in public speaking knows there's a certain amount of training for the body so that your brain doesn't go haywire. And anybody with trauma knows that you theoretically, you intellectually know you're safe in this house. Like, dad is gone now. He's long since passed away. He's not going to come in again drunk and yell at you and hurt you. Mm-hmm. But you walk into that living room and your body starts to go haywire, right? Mm-hmm. And a good psychiatrist will tell you, we're working bottom up here. And when you unite those two things into what I call shalom in the mind, because there's an idea of like all the complex parts of creation in your brain working together, you get what science and psychiatrists call mental health or regulation or mental integration. And the reason that those things can actually come together and change you is because of something called neuroplasticity, which means your lower brain patterns aren't stuck. They actually can change. And it's because new neurons can fire together and then wire together. And one of the most fascinating things we've learned about the brain in the past century-ish is that that's how it works. Like when you connect new patterns and then you work those patterns, there's this classic line that people say over and over, neurons that fire together, wire together. Mm-hmm. It means they actually create new intellectual pathways. And so this can be the spiral of vice. You get addicted into certain mental patterns, or it can be the spiral of virtue. You actually re-knit new patterns. You get over old fears. You now walk into that room and you can breathe. You now walk into that stage and you feel barely an echo of that fear you used to feel. Now you're just soaring. You learn how to swing a bat. You used to not know how to do that, but now you can. This is the beauty of neuroplasticity. It takes bottom up, it takes top down. But a lot of people don't realize how spiritual that is, that it means that you're not stuck with the addictions that you have. Mm-hmm. Like honestly, literally. Biochemically, it is a lie that you always have to be depressed, anxious, and alcoholic, addicted to pornography. Like your body actually can change. Spiritually, we know it is a lie that you are stuck. Like grace, by definition, means tomorrow doesn't have to be like yesterday. Yeah. God wants to change you. And this is the biological truth about your brain, and it's the fundamental spiritual truth about your soul. Isn't it wonderful that they work together the way God made it? Yeah. And so grace is neuroplasticity in the brain, and it abounds. And that's really good news for somebody like me who was in a mental health crisis.
Yeah. So some of what's beautiful, what you're talking about is you're kind of giving a corrective to the idea that, like, if somebody wants to go on a journey of transformation, you can't just, read the list of the fruit of the Spirit and say, if I want those things, they'll automatically happen. Or if I believe the right things about God, they will automatically happen. God invites us into a dance, a partnership, borrow a metaphor that you want, to be able to create the environment by which the Spirit can do the miraculous things. And I think it was Francis Bacon who once said, a little bit of science takes a man away from God, and a lot of science will bring him back. And so the more you look at neuroscience and the way that our brains work, like a subject like neuroplasticity, you realize, that Bible verse of being transformed by the renewing of your mind is actually possible and beautiful. And it's descriptively true. It's not just wishful thinking that it can happen.
It is very true. And it's really given me a new sense of how practical things like fruit of the Spirit are, because it took me out of the realm of like, well, I guess I should just hope and pray for that, into the realm of I should hope, pray, and practice for that. Mm-hmm. I should cultivate. I should work alongside the master gardener named Jesus, who wants to cultivate this fruit in my life. And now I'm free to participate with him. It's made sense of Paul's commands of, don't be anxious, but in everything, by prayer and petition, lift up your requests to God. That never made sense to me until I realized that that's actually replacing one neurological pathway with another. And how do you do that? You exchange your inner monologue of anxiety with an external monologue of prayer and petition. Yeah. And science has only recently demonstrated that actually the brain can't hold anxiety and gratitude at the same time because they're different trains of thought. And so when you practice that one, you're creating the conditions of a non-anxious life, which obviously is hard. It takes a long time, works at the pace of a garden, but it's something you actually cultivate. So I used to think of verses like that as just spiritualized way of thinking about the good life as if there was nothing to do. Now I think of them as spiritualized ways of thinking about the good life with so much we can do in them and so much we're called to do through them. How to do that? Well, we need a lot of episodes to talk about that. Yeah.
But one of the things that I learned when I was in California, we in our church had a partnership with a kind of drug and alcohol rehab program that was particularly true for young adults or for teens. And one of the beautiful things they would do is they would take a picture of the person on the day that they went through intake. And then they would take a picture of when they graduated from the program and the difference. And the thing that stuck out to me the most, because I was often at the commencement where we were giving gifts and celebrating and cheering them on for what they've done, is they would often say, I went into the program because of these negative things that were wrong about me, with me. I was addicted to X, Y, and Z, whatever it was.
Right.
And then what they said was, it wasn't just that the gospel and the new patterns of their life removed the bad stuff. It was that God's Spirit brought the good stuff into their life. To me, that's one of the most important things about this image of the fruit of the Spirit is this is not, like, hey, how can we get by avoiding the pitfalls of the way of the flesh?
Yes.
But how can we also become the kind of people that are like a lush garden in between the desert and the jungle that you described so well? How can we become the kind of people that actually bear fruit that show the goodness and the beauty of God each and every day?
Oh, wow. That's so rich. It's in a very nerdy way. It's making me think of, I was reading Boethius, Consolation of Philosophy this morning. As one does. I won't give too much background there. I am a nerdy. I'm a reader. But I was, he was on this train of thought. I was just reading it this morning about how really evil is nothing. It's like it's moving away from the existence of good, which is everything, and God. And there's some like great classic Plato and philosophy going there. Boethius was a Christian trying to interpret the classic Greek philosophy. But anyway, what it struck for me as you said that is this idea that we often go with a hope of maybe God solving our problems, removing our problems, taking out the thorn in our flesh, which is good. I mean, that's a great place to start. I think what we don't know is just quite how good he is and how much he actually wants to not just get rid of that, but it's better thought of the great exchange. For our nothingness, we get his everything, and that's taking our flaws and turning it into the fruit of the Spirit. The great miracle is that we don't just go from like removing these thorns in our life, of the garden of our life that we're hurting. We get like a luscious, beautiful garden full of fruit, which is joy, which is like abundance. It's not just like, oh, I'm out of pain. It's into this world of pleasure, which is the great story of God. For our nothing, we get his everything. And that's the good news.
It totally is the good news. And so as we start on a journey, thanks for helping to cast a vision for how change really happens, both top down and bottom up, and that our whole lives minister to our souls, including our bodies. Thanks for being vulnerable and sharing your story, and look forward to more conversations. Thanks so much, Justin.
You're welcome. It's a good start.
Thank you so much for joining us for this Cultivate podcast. For more information, go to peachtreechurch.com/cultivate. You can find more resources and a great way for you to take a next step.